So this week we have the privilege to begin once again reading Sefer Bereishit, whose high theology is communicated through very subtle narratives. The relationship between God, the divine, and human beings is told through beautiful stories. And I'd like to focus on Perek Daled, the famous story of the first murder between two brothers, Cain and Abel. The central question that I think really motivates the entire Perek is, why was it that God chose Abel and his karban and rejected Cain and his karban, which ultimately led to Cain murdering Abel? So if you look into the text, the most famous answer given by Rashi, amongst others, is that if you look at the particularities of their karbanot, by Cain it says, he gave me pri adama, from the fruit of the ground, and Abel gave me bechorot sono umichalvehen, from the best of his flock. And because there are no adjectives used to describe the greatness of Cain's karban, it must reflect an inferior measure of devotion, whereas Abel really wanted to give a gift to God and thus gave from the best of what he had, and Cain not so much. That's the most famous answer given. The problem with that answer is, had the story turned out differently, had ultimately God accepted Cain and his karban and rejected Abel, we could have also made a good argument. For example, Cain was the one who decided to give the karban first. It was his idea. And Abel, it just says, he also gave. He's like that annoying little brother who tries to outdo his older brother who had the good idea in the first place. Furthermore, by Cain, it specifically says he was giving a mincha LaHashem, a gift for God. And by Abel, it doesn't say that. So that's a problem with that particular answer. Other answers are also offered. Perhaps what God is teaching us is that whereas Cain was a farmer and Abel was a shepherd, God prefers shepherds to farmers. If you look throughout Tanakh, right, in general, all the great leaders in the Bible are shepherds. Well, that doesn't seem entirely fair, because after all, we needed somebody to do the farming. Yes, the ground was cursed, and now after Perek Gimel, man was going to have to work for his food, but we needed somebody to be a farmer so that we wouldn't starve to death. It doesn't seem just for God to reject Cain purely based on his occupation. Well then, perhaps God is telling us that if you are going to bring him a gift, and the options are a fruit salad or lamb chops, God's not a vegetarian. He wants the meat. And this is not a rejection per se of Cain, but of his vegetable and fruit offering. The problem with that is we do see in Tanakh that vegetable offerings are given and grain offerings are given to God and they are accepted. And also, it wouldn't have been much of a gift if Cain gave one of Abel's flock as a gift. A gift, a true gift, is giving something that you work on, that is yours, that is truly a sacrifice to give up. Because Cain was a farmer, it made sense for him to give fruit. And other answers have been suggested. But a professor of mine, John Levinson, in his book, The Death and Resurrection of the Beloved Son, makes the following beautiful argument. He says that at the end of the day, we actually don't know why God chose Abel and rejected Cain. The text simply does not tell us, and that is quite deliberate. The reason for that is that God often makes mysterious choices. The world is one that we cannot completely fathom and understand. God is mysterious. He is complicated. And the great tragedy of Cain and his fatal flaw, so to speak, was that he could not accept a God who he did not understand. That's his problem, and he took the ultimate action and murdered his brother Abel. The other great tragedy of the story is that we never got to see why Abel was chosen. But if you look throughout Sefer Bereishit at the theme of chosenness, we often don't know at the beginning of the story why our hero was chosen. For example, the great Avraham Avinu. In Perek Yud Bet, God says to him, Lech lecha, go forth. And Avraham goes. And we all make a big deal. Wow, what emunah, what faith Avraham had. He was willing to follow God. Well, yeah, I guess it's a big deal, except Avraham had no children and no land, and God comes to him and says, hey, I'm going to make you the father of a great nation and give you an entire land. Hey, yeah, Avraham went. It makes sense. I'd go. You'd probably go. But by the end of the Avraham story, by Perek Chaf Bet, by the Akedah, we no longer have any doubt as to why Abraham was chosen. We get why God chose Abraham to be the father of the Jewish people. Similarly, by Yosef, when we are first introduced to Yosef in Perek Lamed Zayin of Bereishit, he seems kind of annoying. He's a tattletale. He's not particularly nice. He seems a bit arrogant, having these dreams of grandeur. Sure, his brothers want to kill him. And we all think, why is it that God favors Yosef? Why is it that Yaakov favors Yosef? But also, by the end of the story, when Yosef saves his family, when he actually saves the entire known world at that time, we get it. Yeah, turns out God knew what he was doing. And in all of those stories, when we're introduced to the hero, we have no idea why they have God's favor. But by the end of the story, it makes sense. The tragedy of Hevel is that we never got to see who he would become, why it was that God chose him. And the reason for that is because Cain misunderstood himself. Just because you are not chosen for one thing by God does not mean you've been rejected. And that's a theme we also see throughout Sefer Bereishit. Throughout Sefer Bereishit, we have this theme of chosenness, of brothers, of one person being chosen. But time and again, the other brothers are not rejected. Yishmael becomes the father of a great nation. Esav becomes the father of a great nation. Yosef's brothers ultimately become Bnei Yisrael. But Cain misunderstood himself. He thought that he had been rejected by God, even though he could have been chosen for something else. God says to him, pick yourself back up, it'll be fine for you. But Cain can't get past the fact that he wasn't chosen for this particular mission, that Hevel had been chosen. And so again, he kills his brother Hevel. I once heard a beautiful shot for why it is we bless our children, that they should be like Ephraim and Manasseh. And the reason somebody told me was, we give that blessing to our children because Ephraim and Manasseh, Yaakov switched his hands, thus showing preferential treatment for the younger over the older. But you never see a rivalry between those two brothers. They live at peace with the mystery of the world, with the fact that we can't always understand why one person gets something and someone else gets something else, and it doesn't always make sense to us. And they lived with that reality. Similarly, we know that when Aaron HaKohen was told that his younger brother Moshe was going to be the leader of Bnei Israel, that he was going to take Bnei Israel out of Mitzrayim, he was not bitter thinking, why my younger brother? He was happy. He rejoiced in his brother's exaltation. And therefore, was Aaron HaKohen rejected? No, he was chosen for something else amazing. He becomes the Kohen Gadol. So I think it's important when we're reflecting on the theme of chosenness in Sefer Bereishit to realize and to accept a God that we don't always understand, that initially it doesn't always make sense to us, but that we accept our mission in the world and seek it out. One final question just to leave you with is that I think in education and pedagogy and parenting today, there's this growing trend of making sure that everybody feels like they're chosen. So that today, kids will come home with a trophy. They got 6th place trophy out of 6 teams. Because everybody needs to be a winner and everybody needs to feel like they're great. And there's something very beautiful about that, to feel accepted and like you're part of something. On the other hand, I sometimes wonder if we're not doing a disservice by saying, you know what, maybe basketball isn't your thing. Quick story, I did not make the basketball team in 9th grade in high school. I'm 4'10". I was never going to be a great basketball player. And I remember that feeling of terrible, terrible hurt. But instead, I started a cheerleading squad, the first all-girls cheerleading squad. And we had a great time. And I found out I'm a much better cheerleader than I am basketball player. Had I been accepted onto the team, I would have been benched the whole season and I never would have had the chance to develop this other part of my personality. So ultimately, I look back and I feel so grateful that that coach thought, you know what, she's not going to be that good, and gave me the opportunity to discover other parts of myself. So the question again I want to leave us thinking about is, are we really helping our children and ourselves find our inner strengths, our inner talents, and what we truly have been chosen for? Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.